let's get into it. Makana, you can go first. I have my top 5 running back list. This one, I'm not gonna lie, this one was really hard just because I think there's a ton of talent at the running back position, and you see guys have kind of on and off years, and oh, this guy had a great year, this guy got hurt, and that happens so much at the position. It's very volatile in terms of when guys are being injured, and how often they're injured, and this guy's coming off his injured season. We saw, a guy in Dalvin Cook who comes out, right? First couple years, super banged up, and now he's emerged as one of the better running backs in the league. So, Makana, what are your top 5 running backs? Or who are your top 5 running backs?
Yeah, so first off, I'm going to give my top 5 running backs 5-1, and then I will go over all of them individually so then we know the list. You guys can get your angry comments out of the way, but there's legitimate reasonings behind every single thing that I say. So, top 5 running backs, here we go. Number 5, I've got Nick Chubb. Number 4, I've got Mr. Najee Harris. Number 3, I've got Jonathan Taylor. Then I got a gap. All right. Number 2, Mr. Derrick Henry. Number 1, Christian McCaffrey. All right. I'm going to start off and I'm going to go 5-1 and I'm going to explain these. When I look at Nick Chubb, he is one of the most consistent running backs in the NFL. All right. Yes, he plays, in a hybrid running back system, but this guy just consistently is just churning out yards. He's one of the best between the tackle runners in the NFL. He runs with power. He's got breakaway speed. I see him as a extremely similar, but just slightly worse in the pass catching game to Jonathan Taylor. I think they are very similar backs outside of the pass catching ability, and that's why I have Jonathan Taylor above him. But he is just a monster running up the middle, and he's the guy that makes Cleveland's offense run and has been for the last few seasons. Number 4, Najee Harris. Najee Harris, statistically may not be overwhelmingly great, but that's because he's playing with a bottom 5 offensive line in the NFL. And he's been playing last year he played in a system with Big Ben. Dude wasn't throwing over 25 yards. Everyone knew the ball was getting to Najee Harris, and he was running it very well. Ended up being top 10 in rushing yards. He was actually top 5, number 4 overall in rushing yards, and he just he was catching the ball well, he's moving well, he's breaking tackles, and it was very clear that he had to be the focal point of that entire offense because he seemed like he was the only playmaker with the ball in his hands. And I love Deontay Johnson. I like Chase Claypool. I like a lot of their players. But when they needed a play, it was get the ball to Najee, whether it's in the flats or handing it off to him, and let him work. He was the drive behind that team, and I feel like because he adds, the pass catching game and he adds, the ability to run between the tackles and do it all, I love his game. Jonathan Taylor led the league in rushing last year. He's a great player. He can catch the ball. He can run between the tackles. He's got, one of the fastest top speeds in the NFL. So, he gets space. He's gone. The only thing that I'm looking at him where I'm like, oh yeah, he could be better is just it's difficult to gauge. When you're playing behind the best offensive line in the NFL, it's tough to gauge how good someone is. He's got the best offensive lineman. Maybe you can say Trent Williams, is the best offensive lineman, but come on, when we're looking at the interior, the left guard on the Indianapolis Colts, Quentin Nelson, is the best in the NFL. That dude just mauls everybody over. But Jonathan Taylor, he's a very good running back. I'm not trying to disrespect him with number 3. I think, I had difficulty putting, the back 3 in the top 5 where they were. I love all those players. I think they're very similar, and I don't think it's disrespectful to say any of them are 3, 4, or 5. Now the gap. The top 2, I've got Henry and I've got CMC. These 2 you can flip-flop. I like CMC because of what he adds in the passing game. But Derrick Henry, I think people underestimate Derrick Henry, and I don't know why. Derrick Henry played how many games last year? He played in 8. All right, 8 games. All right? This dude ran for 937 yards. Jonathan Taylor played in 17 games. He ran for 1,811 yards. Derrick Henry played in less than half the games and ran for over half the yards. And people forget, Derrick Henry's better in the second half of the season. That's when Derrick Henry starts taking off, is week 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. That's when it's just 200 yards, 200 yards, 200 yards, because everyone gets tired and Derrick Henry just keeps on churning those legs. He's maybe James Harrison's retired, so, we don't have to look at him. He may be the hardest working workout regimen guy in the offseason that we see in the NFL. This dude is an absolute tank, and it shows. You cannot tackle him. He is feared by every player that ever tries to tackle him. I mean, I bet you could call up Josh Norman, and he still hasn't slept since Derrick Henry stiff-armed him, because he just cannot wake up, from that living nightmare. You can't tackle this guy with one person. He's the only player in the NFL at the running back position where it is a true, you need multiple players. And that's the thing that separates Derrick Henry. Then at number one, I obviously have Christian McCaffrey. I think people look at Christian McCaffrey and they say, it's a white running back. His father is a Hall of Fame wide receiver. He's a pass-catching running back. He's a third down back. And people look at him, and he's the best pass-catching running back in the NFL. So you can't say, oh, he can't catch the ball. No, he is a phenomenal pass catcher. But he's just as good running between the tackles, and people do not understand that. People watch Christian McCaffrey, and they say, oh, it's a white running back. He's a pass catcher. Give this man the rock. Run I form, run single back, halfback dive, halfback power. This dude will make someone miss in the hole, and he will take off for 20, 30 yards consistently. He is not just pitch it out to him on the outside, type of running back. He's not a Tariq Cohen, right? You run Christian McCaffrey up the middle consistently. He gets you great yards. And then you pass it to him, and he's going to catch the ball as well, maybe as any wide receiver in the NFL. And I think people will say, oh, but Christian McCaffrey, he gets hurt a lot. That's not the question. This isn't best fantasy running backs to draft. This is best running backs, top 5 running backs. When they're healthy, Christian McCaffrey is the best running back in the NFL because he's the entire offense of the Carolina Panthers. There's no other player, maybe outside of Derrick Henry, that you can say, hey, this guy does everything for this team. Christian McCaffrey, when he was playing last year, granted, it was a short stint, the Carolina Panthers had a winning record. Not just a winning record, they were one of the few undefeated teams in the NFL. He gets hurt. How many games did they end up winning? 5 games? Pretty sure they won 3 with Christian McCaffrey. So they lost him, and it was like, oh my gosh. Everyone's all like, oh, Chuba Hubbard, fantasy football stud. And everyone's like, wait, never mind. Chuba Hubbard looks like he's horrible. Why? Because Christian McCaffrey's that good that you can run an entire offense through him. There's very few players in the NFL where you can say, hey, he's your entire offense. You can't say that. I don't think you can say that about Jonathan Taylor. I don't think you can say that about Najee Harris. Can't say that about Nick Chubb. The only other guy you can say that about is Derrick Henry, and that's why I have that gap.
Okay, I think it's fair. Now, I will say I did my rankings a little bit different because I do value injury or ability to really carry an offense. I'm accounting that into it, and that's why rankings are hard. Just because you look at it and you're like, okay, well, what's top 5? What's the best running back to me compared to you? It might be a little bit different. It's not like it's okay, we're doing top 5 fantasy backs, like you were saying, because then it would change a little bit. Then you're looking at the offenses around him, the stuff around him. But my top 5 from 5 to 1. I think there's 7 guys that you can bring up that are the elite backs. That's what my opinion is. So 5 to 1, I got Alvin Kamara, Najee Harris, Christian McCaffrey, Jonathan Taylor, Derrick Henry. Now, if I'm looking at it talent-wise, I'm probably going to move McCaffrey up, right? Just in terms of talent. But the question is, because I think that you're absolutely true. When you're talking about guys that are in between the tackles runner, Christian McCaffrey has been a extremely elite in between the tackle, inside, outside runner since he was in Stanford. And that's why he put up ridiculous numbers at Stanford. In the NFL, we see him take a ball in between the center and the guard and not get touched for 80 yards. He does that occasionally. That's the thing. So that's part of it. But then we look at Derrick Henry, and I know Derrick Henry, it's bad because he got hurt last year. But come on, how many carries had this guy had in the NFL? How many? He had never really missed a game before last season when it was he broke his toe, and he still comes back 3 weeks early, right? So I think Derrick Henry is your number 1. And I think that you can look at it and you can make the argument. You can make the argument for a lot of guys. Okay, well, if Derrick Henry can't be number 1 because he doesn't affect the passing game as much as some of the other guys. That's fair, right? Except one caveat. The best play in the sport is the Derrick Henry screen pass because you run it every 3 weeks and it's 40 yards to a touchdown almost every single time. It's absurd. They don't run it very much, but it's just we got to run something. All right, let's just run the screen pass. And it works, and it's ridiculous. and Derrick Henry gets the ball 30 times a game. I think Jonathan Taylor is a little bit tough to grade, just like you said, the offensive line is so stacked. Everything's kind of built around him where it's like, okay, yeah, he should be succeeding. He's a great downhill runner. He's an extremely elite runner. I just can't take away what he did last season. He's a pretty good receiver out of the backfield. And I just think like moving forward, him at 23 compared to McCaffrey at 26 or 27, some of their injury history, I'd probably rock with Jonathan Taylor from here on out. I get why though, McConnell. I get why you have McCaffrey higher, and I love Christian McCaffrey. After that, Najee Harris at number 4. After McCaffrey at 3, Najee Harris, he's going to be number 1 on this list at some point in his career. Like he's going to like when he's a little bit older, when he's a couple years in the league, and we see him with a better offensive line, we're going to realize, oh wow, this guy is a really good runner. Now you look at his yards per carry, efficiency, stuff like that. It's not quite there. And that happens to a lot of rookie backs. You dance a little bit when you don't have a great offensive line. Like the vision isn't quite there that it's going to be probably in a few years, and he's going to develop that I think a little bit more. And the Steelers, what they should be doing is they should be trying to build the best offensive line around him as possible. They should be trying to do what the Colts did. But this is a guy that as a rookie caught 74 passes because his team basically couldn't run the ball because their offensive line was too bad. Like that's what he's able to do. He is 6'2" or 6'3" and like 230, 240 pounds. He hurdles guys. He sidesteps multiple players in the backfield, dances through the hole. Like he is so quick for how much he weighs and how heavy he is and how violent of a player he is, that this is one of the craziest athletes we've seen at the running back position. So I expect him eventually to be like a number 1 guy, but I have him at 4 this year, I guess, going in. It's that's the thing, dude. It's really hard. Like, all right, yeah, I would be so happy like if the Niners had him. Like it would be like I would absolutely love Najee Harris on my team. And then at 5, this one was really hard. I think there's 3 guys that you can bring up. I think you can bring up Dalvin Cook. I think you can bring up Nick Chubb like you did. And then I think you can also bring up Alvin Kamara. The only reason why I took Alvin Kamara, and I think it's hard because like Nick Chubb is a better runner than Alvin Kamara. Dalvin Cook is probably a better runner than Kamara. But Alvin Kamara just has like, and this is also another part where it's kind of hard. If we're talking like gadget pieces and stuff, you're probably going to bring up Kamara in that discussion with the Christian McCaffreys, the Deebo Samuels, right? Like guys like that, just because he's used so much in the passing game. He can line up as slot. He can kind of do whatever. But when I'm thinking of like superstars at the running back position of just like get the ball in his hands and let him figure it out, let him, run the offense through him, that's the guy because that whole offense has ran around him for years now. I get that MT's there and MT's been a huge part of that, kind of you have to really focus on him. The linebackers have to really focus on MT coming across the middle. That's a huge thing that's been able to help him. But also, whenever the Saints are in a pinch and they need to score, they need something, they're giving the ball to Kamara. And Kamara's been absolutely fantastic throughout his career. So I'm putting him at 5, but if someone says, you guys are sleeping on Dalvin, that's fair, man. I get it. Like, Dalvin's great. Same thing with Nick Chubb. So I think there's some other guys that can be discussed, but that is my top 5 list.
Yeah, I like how you brought up, there's 7 guys. I wrote honorable mentions. I had Dalvin Cook and Alvin Kamara. So we were right on with the top 7. The thing that I want to add in, talking about Jonathan Taylor, because I think a lot of people look at the statistics and they say, wow, when was the last time a guy rushed for 1,800 yards other than Derrick Henry? We added an extra game to the NFL regular season. So I think when people are looking at all of these positions and they see all of these guys putting up all of these great stats, and they're like, they look at the totals, and it looks a lot more impressive than, it's very impressive. I'm not trying to take away 1,800 yards, however many games you play, very impressive, would have been 1,700 yards or whatever. Still an impressive number. But we do have to take into consideration that it is an extra game. They do play an extra game. And I think that's just something, I'm not trying to say, oh, that was the reason why I took him back. But I just want to point out, hey, the numbers over the next couple of seasons are going to be higher than in previous seasons, okay? So when, next year, if another running back rushes for 1,700, 1,800 yards, I don't know who it is. Maybe it's, Nick Chubb. Maybe it's Derrick Henry, whatever. It's like, okay, they did play an extra game. Christian McCaffrey put up the 1,000 season, I believe in the last year that he was healthy, which was 3 seasons ago. Derrick Henry had the 2,000 yard rushing season. These are seasons in a 16-game season. It's like right after O.J. Simpson set the NFL record for most rushing yards per game in a single season. He averaged over 140 rush yards per game. In my opinion, still the greatest single-season rushing season of all time. 2,000 yards in a 14-game season. Never been done. Still, to this day. These numbers are going to be affected, whether it's ranking running backs, quarterbacks, wide receivers. The numbers are going to be changing. The standards are going to be sliding of how many yards they need to be considered elite, how many rushing touchdowns and things like that. And also, just finally, when you're ranking guys, don't look at fantasy totals. All right? Austin Eckler, not in this conversation. Not in this conversation. All right? I get he's a great fantasy option. I get when you're looking up, who's the best guy to draft in fantasy? Austin Eckler's up there. All right? Doesn't mean he's a top 5 running back in the NFL. I just wanted to throw that out there in case people are like, what about Austin Eckler? What about Joe Mixon? Good players. Very good fantasy players. But we're talking about running back skill. And guys like Nick Chubb sucks for fantasy. I hate Nick Chubb in fantasy. He plays in a 2 running back system, inconsistent with, how many carries he gets per game. But overall, I think I really like the players that we brought to the table. I still think that Christian McCaffrey's on top. But overall, I think that was overall some pretty good lists.